They said moving to the suburbs would be peaceful. They never warned me that a woman in pearls would try to force me to paint my house pink, and that the FBI would show up because of it. It was barely past 7 a.m. on a Saturday when someone knocked on my door. Not the soft kind of knock you expect from a neighbor borrowing sugar. This was sharp and deliberate. I opened the door in my hoodie and slippers, expecting a delivery guy or maybe someone lost. Instead, I found her. "Good morning," she said with an unsettling smile. "Kendra Farnsworth, president of the Rosewood HOA. I've come to welcome you and address a serious matter regarding your home." She handed me a pale pink envelope, sealed with a wax rose. I blinked. "You serious?" "Quite," she replied. "Your house is the wrong color. It's white." "Exactly," she said, as if I'd admitted to a felony. "As per HOA Initiative 4B, all homes must now conform to the approved Rosewood color scheme. Yours must be repainted in shade hash RHOA pink within 10 days. I stared at her, wondering if I was being pranked. "You want me to paint my house pink?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "This is not a suggestion, Mr. Carter. It's a directive. You'll find all the penalties for non-compliance outlined in the document." She turned and walked away before I could say another word, heels tapping across the concrete like punctuation. I shut the door, baffled. I'd only lived in Rosewood Estates for 3 weeks, bought the house straight up with no mortgage, no weird covenants, and I'd read the HOA agreement cover to cover. Nowhere in there was anything about mandatory pink paint. I called my realtor. He was shocked. Then I called my lawyer, Dan, a practical guy who liked details more than drama. "She can't enforce that without a board vote," he said after looking over the documents I emailed, "and if no such vote happened, it's just intimidation." The thing was, it didn't feel like just intimidation. It felt personal. Over the next few days, I started talking to my neighbors, people I hadn't even met yet, not because I was outgoing, but because something about this didn't sit right. I asked casually while mowing my lawn, grabbing the mail, walking my dog. Everyone had a story. The woman 2 doors down had been fined $200 for planting tulips instead of HO-approved roses. A man across the street said he had to take down his Christmas lights before Thanksgiving. One neighbor, Mark, told me something that chilled me. "She's got a drone," he whispered. "Flies it at night. Says it's for monitoring tree height violations. But I've seen it hovering over backyards, mine included." And then, one night, someone slipped a note under my door. No envelope, no signature. Just a plain white sheet of paper typed in courier font. "She's not just abusing her power, she's hiding something. Don't trust the board. Watch your back." Now I wasn't just suspicious, I was paranoid. I started noticing things. 2 black SUVs parked on the far end of the street, same ones, different positions each day. Tinted windows, just sitting, watching. I didn't know if they were watching me or her. But something bigger was going on. Then came the breaking point. On the morning of day 9, one day before Kendra's arbitrary pink deadline, I was awakened by the roar of a delivery truck outside. I walked out to find a massive paint truck idling in front of my driveway. 5 large buckets of blinding pink paint sat in the back. The driver hopped down with a clipboard. "Delivery for Blake Carter, 5 gallons of RHOA pink." "I didn't order that," I said. "Says it was prepaid, by a Kendra Farnsworth." I looked down the street, and there she was, standing tall in her signature pastel blazer, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, watching me like she'd won. I didn't hesitate. I stormed toward her across the cul-de-sac. "You sent that paint to my house?" "I did," she said calmly. "I thought it might help you meet your deadline. Consider it a neighborly gesture." "You're not my neighbor," I snapped. "You're an authoritarian control freak." She tilted her head, amused. "That's quite an accusation for someone violating 4 community guidelines in just 3 weeks." "This is harassment." She gave me a slow, almost pitying smile. "Then by all means file a complaint. Let's see how far it gets." And then, before I could respond, someone else did. A voice rang out from behind us. "Mrs. Farnsworth?" We both turned. 2 men in dark suits were walking toward us from the black SUVs, badges out. No nonsense. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, we'd like to ask you a few questions." The color drained from her face. Her coffee cup trembled slightly in her hand. That was the moment everything shifted. The paint didn't matter anymore. Neither did her rules. Because it turned out Kendra Farnsworth wasn't just the neighborhood queen. She was about to become the neighborhood scandal. Kendra's smug grin collapsed the moment the FBI flashed their badges. Her coffee sloshed onto her blouse, but she didn't seem to notice. I don't understand," she stammered. "What is this about? I've done nothing wrong." The taller agent spoke with professional calm. Mrs. Farnsworth, we're conducting an active investigation involving financial misconduct, mail fraud, and abuse of public authority. We'd appreciate your cooperation. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, she snapped. This is ridiculous, the second agent stepped forward. And that's exactly why we're here, he looked past her, directly at me. Mr. Carter, may we ask you a few questions as well? My pulse jumped. Sure, what's this about? The agents exchanged a glance. We believe you've been targeted, along with several other residents, by what we suspect is an illegal HOA extortion scheme. Suddenly, this wasn't just about pink paint anymore. The agents asked to speak with me privately, so we sat in my living room. They pulled out a thick file. Inside were documents, copies of fake bylaw changes, screenshots of emails, lists of fines issued to homeowners, and a financial trail. Agent Cross leaned in. Your HOA president has been modifying association bylaws without proper votes, issuing fake violations, and collecting thousands in fines from residents. Most of that money never hits the HOA account. She's stealing from the neighborhood? I asked. Not just that, said Agent Miller, flipping to a bank record. She's laundering the money through fake landscaping companies and shell maintenance services. It's textbook fraud. And she tried to force you to repaint your house, added Cross, to test your compliance. She does this to new residents, especially ones who paid in full, no mortgage oversight. So I was a target. I showed them the note that had been slipped under my door. Agent Miller took a photo of it and nodded slowly. Looks like someone on the inside's getting nervous. You're not the only one who got a note. At least 3 other homeowners in similar communities in the state have had the same kind of messages, all tied to Kendra's property management company. Wait, she runs more than one HOA? I asked. Try 11, said Cross. And we believe they're all involved. The agents asked me not to mention the investigation to anyone, but they did give me one warning. She may double down. If she senses you're onto her, expect her to retaliate. They weren't wrong. The next day, I woke to find a red notice taped to my front door. Urgent HOA violation, mandatory hearing in 48 hours. The accusation? Suspicious behavior, unauthorized contact with federal agencies, and improper landscaping height. I laughed out loud. She was trying to scare me, but this time I wasn't backing down. That afternoon, I walked to the HOA office to attend the so-called hearing. It was just her and 2 other board members I'd never met before. Both looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Kendra stood behind a podium like a courtroom judge. Mr. Carter, she began, your actions have caused disruption in this community. Your refusal to comply with paint regulations and your recent associations with government agencies, whom you had no authority to involve, are grounds for temporary suspension of your property privileges. Excuse me, I said, pulling out my phone. You're threatening to punish me for speaking to federal investigators? She blinked. This is a private matter. We have the right to regulate homeowner behavior. Actually, came a voice from the door. That's where you're wrong. Everyone turned. Agent Cross stepped into the room, badge raised. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers followed. Kendra Farnsworth, you're under arrest for fraud, misappropriation of funds, falsification of HOA documents, and obstruction of justice. Her mouth fell open. This is a mistake, she shouted. You have no idea what you're doing. She turned to the other board members. Tell them I'm innocent. Neither said a word. One of the officers approached. Ma'am, please place your hands behind your back. You can't do this. I built this neighborhood. I am Rosewood. Click. The handcuffs silenced her, and just like that, the queen of the HOA was dethroned, right in her own courtroom. As the agents led her out, neighbors gathered on their porches. Some gasped, some recorded, some just stared in disbelief. One elderly woman clapped. I couldn't help but smile. Later that evening, I received a call from Agent Cross. Thanks for your help, Mr. Carter. Your instincts were spot on. She's going away for a long time. So, I don't have to paint the house pink? He chuckled. You're safe. Keep it white. I looked out at the calm suburban street. Kids were riding bikes. Sprinklers were on. It actually felt like a neighborhood again, peaceful, like they said it would be. I thought it was over. Kendra had been hauled away in handcuffs. Neighbors were gossiping like it was the Oscars. For the first time in weeks, my street actually felt normal. Kids were back outside. No pink paint buckets mysteriously appeared on driveways. HOA notices stopped showing up, but the peace didn't last long. 3 days after her arrest, I came home to find someone in my backyard. A man in a navy blue polo with the Rosewood Property Maintenance logo stitched above the pocket was standing near my shed with a clipboard. I didn't recognize him. Can I help you? I called out. He didn't flinch. Routine inspection, debris near the shed. There's no debris, and inspections were suspended. He offered a tight smile. Just doing my job. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Mind telling me your name? The man stared at the camera for a second too long. Then he turned and walked away. No explanation, no ID. I watched as he got into a dark pickup truck with no plates and disappeared down the street. Something told me Kendra wasn't working alone. That night, I received an email from Agent Miller. Simple subject line: "We need to talk. It goes deeper." The next morning, I met him and Cross at their temporary field office set up in a confiscated HOA meeting hall. "She wasn't just embezzling funds," Miller said, gesturing toward a map of the neighborhood on the wall. "We found hidden safes in 3 of the homes tied to shell companies, all built around the same time." "Wait," I said, "you're telling me there are secret compartments hidden in the houses?" "Not just compartments," Cross added. "We're talking about physical evidence of wire fraud, forged permits, and, get this, ledgers tracking payments to contractors that don't exist." "Why hide that in people's houses?" "Because no one would look. The HOA controlled home inspections. Kendra or someone she trusted would recommend service, send in one of their guys, and that guy would hide whatever she needed hidden. And one of those homes," he tapped a red dot on the map, "is yours." They requested permission to search my walls, especially behind the laundry room where the blueprints showed strange remodeling. I agreed. 2 FBI forensic agents arrived later that day. It didn't take long. After unscrewing a ventilation panel that looked off-center, they found a narrow space between the drywall and outer paneling. Inside was a sealed metal box labeled Board Docs. Inside the box, photocopies of altered HOA bylaws with forged signatures, a ledger of fines issued to dozens of families, with notes like "payoff received" and "mark for resale," and most damning, a USB drive containing video footage of private board meetings, ones never disclosed to the community. We watched some of the footage later that day. In one recording, Kendra stood in front of a small group of cronies. "We keep this quiet. We stay in power," she said, swirling a wine glass. "People don't want transparency. They want order, and I provide that, even if they hate me for it." But it wasn't just her voice that stood out. A man responded, someone off camera. "We have new buyers moving into Carter's property. Better get him out before he stirs too much trouble." That was before I'd even moved in, so it was all planned. Targeting me was part of a long-standing scheme to flip properties for profit. Anyone who resisted the HOA's rulebook was pressured, fined, or forced out. And the person in my backyard? Likely part of the cleanup crew, trying to retrieve what Kendra never got the chance to collect. Agent Cross leaned back, eyes fixed on the footage. "This isn't just a neighborhood scam anymore. This is RICO level," I exhaled. "So what happens now?" "We build the case. We flip the other board members, and we get justice for every person she tried to silence." The next day, I posted a letter on the HOA community board. Just 8 simple words, handwritten in thick black marker. "If they silence you, speak louder than ever." That letter sparked a revolution. Neighbors began sharing their stories, posting photos of bogus violation notices, screenshots of absurd fines, email threats from Kendra and her team. A retired couple down the street found 2 hidden safes in their attic after seeing my story online. The neighborhood woke up, and for the first time, the HOA couldn't hide. But Kendra, she wasn't done yet. 3 days later, her lawyer issued a public statement claiming she was set up by radical anti-HOA extremists. She blamed me, the FBI, and the community she ruled for her downfall. She even filed for bail. Then the photos leaked. Images of Kendra dining with corrupt contractors, bank transfers to Cayman accounts, her personal closet filled with items bought using association funds, including a $4,000 gold-plated dog bed. She didn't just lose her position, she lost the narrative. Still, the damage she caused lingered. Kendra's arrest was just the first domino. What followed was an unraveling so massive, so deeply rooted in the HOA's foundation, that it shook our entire neighborhood to the core. And yet, the most shocking betrayal hadn't even surfaced yet. 2 weeks after the initial raids, Agent Cross called me again. "We've got something," he said, his voice lower than usual, "and we think you should see it in person." At this point, I'd seen hidden safes, heard secret boardroom recordings, and found out my house was a vault for white-collar crime, so I wasn't sure what could surprise me anymore. I was wrong. At the temporary FBI site inside the old HOA clubhouse, Agent Miller laid out a collection of files across the table, photos of other board members, transcripts of secret meetings, financial documents that crossed state lines. And in the middle of it all, a name, Nathan Rowe, my real estate agent. The guy who had practically begged me to buy into Rosewood, the guy who had told me what a tight-knit, secure community it was, the same guy who mysteriously vanished after I moved in. Agent Miller tapped his photo. Turns out your realtor was one of the architects of this scam. He worked with Kendra to identify homes with no mortgage oversight, buyers who paid in cash or had large down payments, people less likely to ask questions, people like you. I leaned back, stunned. He sold me this place knowing I'd be targeted? Cross nodded. He got a kickback on every homeowner who was successfully flipped by the HOA. Your property was supposed to be flipped within 3 months. Unbelievable. He's currently in custody in Colorado, tried to run. They handed me a copy of a statement he gave under interrogation. In it, Nathan admitted the board had a hit list of homes to be harassed until the owners either sold or surrendered control of their HOA voting rights. One sentence chilled me to the bone. The HOA didn't just enforce rules, they designed them to break people. The FBI began holding closed-door interviews with former board members. Most cracked under pressure. It wasn't just Kendra pulling strings, it was an entire council of corruption. The vice president, Michael Ray, admitted to shredding real violation appeals. The treasurer, Linda Vaughn, confessed to creating fake invoices for services never performed. The board secretary, a woman named Denise, cried for 30 minutes straight before admitting that her signature had been forged on multiple financial reports. But she'd stayed silent because Kendra promised I'd never have to work again. When the dust settled, 7 arrests had been made. Over $1.2 million in stolen homeowner fees had been traced. And 4 homes in the neighborhood, mine included, had been used to store evidence of the scam. The HOA wasn't just corrupt, it had become a criminal organization. The media caught wind of the case. Soon, our quiet little suburb was the subject of nightly news segments and exposés. Headlines like, HOA from Hell, FBI busts suburban crime ring, pink paint, fake fines, and federal charges. They even used the photos someone took of Kendra being arrested on the dock as a stock image. Her screaming face, her floral dress whipping in the wind, was on every screen in town. One afternoon, I saw her mugshot taped to the HOA bulletin board, with the word Justice written over it in red Sharpie. Still, for all the FBI had uncovered, there was one last mystery: the missing money. According to the ledgers, nearly $400,000 had vanished, money paid by residents, but never deposited into any known account. We believe there's a safe house, Cross told me. A physical property used to store cash, documents, or even unregistered assets, but Kendra won't talk. That's when I remembered something strange. Weeks ago, before all this started, Kendra had once bragged at a community mixer, "There's a house in this neighborhood that's not on any map. It's the safest place in Rosewood." At the time, I thought she was joking. Now I wasn't so sure. With my help, the agents reviewed utility records, satellite maps, and HOA documents. Eventually, we found it, a parcel of land listed as common property, but showing signs of recent construction. It was deep in the woods behind the retention pond, overgrown trail, no driveway. We hiked in, flashlights cutting through the trees. And there it was, a concrete bunker disguised as a tool shed, locked tight with a biometric pad. Agent Cross pressed a gloved finger to the scanner. Nothing. Miller tried a crowbar. The door creaked open, revealing a heavy steel safe. Inside, stacks of cash, hundreds of money orders, dozens of gold coins, and an envelope labeled Board Insurance. Inside it was a burner phone and a memory card containing backups of every secret meeting Kendra ever held. It was her insurance, her last card, and now it belonged to the FBI. You'd think once the FBI raided your neighborhood and the HOA was taken down, life would go back to normal. But normal doesn't return overnight, especially when your community just lived through a suburban crime thriller. The pink paint on my porch was still chipping off, but at least now it didn't come with a violation notice. The trial of the century Rosewood style. The courthouse was packed. Reporters elbowed each other for position. Kendra strolled in wearing a muted gray suit, a far cry from her flashy floral dresses. But her arrogance, still intact. She didn't look nervous. She looked entitled. She acted like she still had power. But when the prosecution opened with hours of footage from the memory card hidden in her bunker, videos of secret meetings, threats against homeowners, backroom deals, her face changed. The jury heard it all. "We control the value of every house on this block. If someone doesn't comply, we crush them. You're not just enforcing rules, you're building a throne." And the cherry on top? A recorded phone call between Kendra and Nathan Rowe where she said, "The pink house? I want it painted. I want him humiliated, and then I want him out." Her voice echoed through the courtroom like poison on loudspeaker. When the guilty verdict came down, multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering, there was no applause in the courtroom, just quiet relief, like a bad dream finally fading. Kendra was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, no parole for the first 12. Her co-conspirators received varying sentences, from probation and fines to 8 years behind bars. The FBI said it was one of the largest HOA takedowns in the state's history. New beginnings? Rosewood needed healing. The HOA had been dissolved, but the wounds ran deep. Neighbors who'd turned on each other, homeowners who'd lost money or even their properties. Trust was a rare currency. That's why the community voted to replace the HOA with a neighborhood advisory council. No fines, no abuse of power, just volunteers, transparency, and support. Guess who they asked to chair the first council? Me. I declined, respectfully. I didn't fight to be in charge, I said. I fought so no one could rule us again. The house that almost broke me. I kept the pink trim on my porch. Why? To remind myself of what I'd survived, to remind others what happens when power goes unchecked. People started calling it the Pink Rebellion. Tourists even stopped to take selfies in front of it. It became a symbol of resistance, of justice, of a man who wouldn't back down. Funny how the ugliest paint job in town became its most inspiring landmark. Unexpected visitors. One sunny Saturday, as I sipped coffee on my porch, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Agent Cross. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing me a small manila envelope. Inside was a photo, taken during the raid. It showed Kendra on the dock, screaming as 2 agents cuffed her in front of the luxury yacht she'd used HOA funds to purchase. "Proof that no one's above the rules," he said. He saluted and walked off. I framed the photo, hung it right above the HOA's final violation notice to me, the one demanding I repaint my house, a final twist. Months later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just one sentence typed on a plain sheet of paper. "You were never supposed to win." I laughed, because I hadn't just won. We all had, a community reborn. The neighborhood changed. People who barely spoke before now waved at each other, shared tools, held block parties. Instead of surveillance, we had support. Instead of fines, we had forgiveness. Someone planted a small garden near the clubhouse ruins. A handmade wooden sign read, "Here lies the old Rosewood HOA. May it never rise again." Epilogue: The real victory. This story isn't just about a crazy HOA or an overbearing Karen who thought she was queen. It's about how ordinary people can stand up when things go wrong. It's about holding the powerful accountable. It's about community. The pink paint still flakes in the sun. But it's not a mark of shame anymore. It's a badge of battle. And every time I walk past it, I remember. We didn't just survive the HOA, we defeated it. Forever.